700 employees lost their jobs in a single morning. 1.2 million passengers had their bookings canceled. And the day after Rex collapsed, fares between Adelaide and Melbourne jumped 95%. 95% in a single day. That wasn't an accident. It wasn't market shock, and it wasn't a surprise to anyone who understands Australian aviation, because what happened in 2024 wasn't an unexpected tragedy. It was the system working exactly as it was designed to work. Why has Australia, one of the wealthiest countries in the developed world, built a domestic aviation market where competing is nearly impossible and where passengers always foot the bill? Australia spans 7.7 million square kilometers. For context, the entire continent of Europe fits within Australia's borders with room to spare. Perth on the western coast is farther from Sydney than London is from Moscow.
Now, here's the thing. In other continental-scale countries with this problem, there's a way out. Europe has high-speed rail that gets you from Paris to London in 2.5 hours. Japan has the Shinkansen. In the United States, cars cover medium distances, and there's still a passenger rail network connecting major cities in the east.
Australia is different. There is no high-speed train between Sydney and Melbourne, and while highways cross the country, the distances are so extreme and the terrain so isolated that driving simply isn't a practical alternative between major cities. Flying in Australia, this market power. In plain language, when you control the only product people can't go without, you set the price wherever you want. Now, imagine it's not one company holding that power, it's two, and that every time someone has tried to enter that market over the last 35 years, the intruder gets eliminated. This isn't economic theory. Let's talk history, because this is where things get strange. A lot of people outside Australia remember Ansett. For decades, it was the country's second largest carrier, a direct rival to Qantas. In September 2000, 30,000 employees, more than 1 million passengers with nowhere to fly. It was one of the largest corporate collapses in Australian history. But Ansett wasn't the beginning, and it definitely wasn't the end. Compass Airlines tried in 1990. It lasted less than 2 years before being forced to shut down. It tried again in 1992. It folded again in 1993. Impulse Airlines arrived in the early 2000s with aggressive fares and competitive routes. It didn't last long. It was absorbed by Qantas, which then folded it into Jetstar. Tiger Airways, the Australian arm of the Asian budget carrier, spent years trying to build a sustainable operation. In 2020, during the pandemic, Virgin shut it down. Bonza launched in 2023 with optimism and routes to smaller cities that the major carriers ignored. It died in April 2024. And Rex, which had operated as a regional carrier for decades with deep roots in outback communities, decided to expand into the Golden Triangle, the 3 most lucrative routes in the country: Sydney-Melbourne, Sydney-Brisbane, and Melbourne-Brisbane. It was wiped out in July 2024. That's 6 serious attempts at competition over 35 years. Not one survived. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because when you have 6 attempts at competition and 6 failures, there are exactly 2 possible explanations. The first is collective bad luck, that 6 different companies in different decades with different business models simply weren't good enough. The second explanation is that the system was built for them to fail. And the data points clearly to the second option. When Rex announced its expansion into the Golden Triangle in 2021, the incumbent's response was immediate.
Qantas increased Jetstar capacity on the same routes Rex had begun operating, driving prices down and intensifying competition beyond what Rex could sustain in the long term.
At the same time, it launched operations on 10 regional routes that formed the financial backbone of Rex's business, the routes where Rex had history, customer loyalty, and operational efficiency. This was confirmed publicly by John